Khuselwa Dyantyi joining us this afternoon. Khuselwa, hello to you, and also hello to Joe Oesi. Khuselwa, let me start with you for a moment, just because off the back of that conversation with Slee, what we're hearing from mining companies and what we're hearing from governments is that they've done a lot in the last 9 years. Not one single person we've spoken to, Khuselwa, on the ground affected directly by this seems to think that is the case. Have we failed so badly over the last 9 years that it's actually gotten worse for them?
Good afternoon, Gareth. Oh, yes, it has been 9 years since the Marikana Massacre. If you can look exactly what the government has done so far, if you remember very well, there was a Marikana commission that was established, which was had its own recommendations, whereby the certain police officers and the police force itself had to be transformed, and certain police officers had to be investigated. So 9 years later, when we're talking about seeking justice for those victims, we know that there are 9 police officers who appeared in court recently, and 4 of them were acquitted, and now we have 5 police officers that are still appearing in court. And that alone, we know those cases that were referred to for prosecutions are not even related to the events of the 16th. So when we're talking about the massacre itself, there is completely nothing that was done to provide justice for those victims. And we know that, of course, most of the victims, they filed their civil claims, which were part of it was paid, and they are still expecting for further claims that has to be paid by the state. So, and I've seen most of the reporters, they are there by the Marikana on the ground. You look at the Marikana, you look at the settlement, it's exactly the same as it was 9 years ago. There is no development, and you're asking the mine workers themselves if whether after their colleagues died, was their blood shed for in vain, or is there anything that they benefited after everything? They will tell you the living conditions, they are still the same.
Yeah, they are exactly the same. Khuselwa, let me come in there because I think you've brought up such a good point. I want to go to Joe Oesi on this. Joe, you and I have spoken many times over the years. Many will know your film focusing on this tragedy. Exactly as to what Khuselwa is saying, I can't help but think if you started filming your documentary now, it would look exactly the same as it did all those years ago. That's how little has changed for these people.
Yes. Good afternoon, Gareth, and good afternoon to the viewers. I think what you say is very much true, and it's just very unfortunate that at the time when I did the filming, it took me a period of about 5 years or so to do that filming. And we looked at the conditions not only of mine workers, but of the villages, and in particular the Vonderkop village, which is the land where the community lives. The mine surface infrastructure and the Lonmin hostels, which now is owned by Sibanye, I believe, are on the adjacent property. But the impacts of mining and is impacting on the informal.
Joe, it looks like I might have lost your signal for a moment. Joe, we're going to see if your picture unfreezes. We'll come back to you in a moment. Khuselwa, let me come back to you on this. And I'm sure you've had this debate and discussion with many people before, but help me understand this. When you look at your organization, Socio-Economic Rights Institute, which comes first in this case for the Marikana victims? Is it social or economic? I would argue it's economic first. It's economic upliftment. From there, social strength is born, or would you disagree?
No, I think they are both very important because, number one, when you look at the social change there versus the economic change, I think they are both are very important. Equally so, when you're talking about the economic side, because we know that there are mines there by the communities that the community is expected to be benefiting from having them there, but there is nothing.
Joe, let me come back to you. Joe, I see you're back with us again. Looks like your picture froze for a moment, so I want to come back to you on this one. Perhaps just pick up on your point you were talking about a moment ago. You were saying 5 years later you'd gone back to speak to a particular community. My point to you was you could have done that documentary now, this year, and not much would have changed. It might be frozen again. Joe, can you hear me? Go ahead.
Yes, I can hear you very clearly, Gareth. Unfortunately, that's a very sad indictment of this current system. When we visited there, which was just very few days after August 16th, which is now a day in infamy for the day on which the massacre actually happened, we noticed that largely most of the workers there and the residents, their living standards were very much below the standards that you would expect of an area that is so rich in platinum. Wonderkop is listed, that it is a land that has a lot of claims against it, and the status of the land, is regarded politically and legally as a tribal land, and which has profound impacts on the social services to the residents on the land and the infrastructure and development there. Historically and currently, the residents are afforded standard services and development support, which is not saying much. As you say, not much has changed there.
Khuselwa, and this is exactly where I was hoping to go to you next. We can keep having these conversations. Next year will be a decade of this, Khuselwa, that we're going to look back on. If we keep saying nothing has changed, and you're both absolutely right, what needs to change? It's starting to become an event, an annual event, every year where the media flock there on a particular date, government miraculously makes themselves available, and then a few days later, everyone vanishes again. It's starting to become one of those, it would be nice to do something, but August only comes around once a year.
I think the most important thing that is always been advocated by the victims is to see justice. And what is justice looks like when we're talking about justice, especially for those who lost their loved ones. They want to see the prosecutions, especially they want to know how their loved ones were killed on the 16th. Who is accountable for their death? And today we know very well that those cases have not been finalized. Number two, they want a government to take responsibility. They want at least someone from the state to come and apologize to those families, to be present, because most of the time, we know when we commemorate the 16th of August, many people will come, but I've never seen anyone coming from the government to appear there by the copy, or to even go to the families' homes and show some remorse of what happened 9 years ago. So that is one of the most important parts. The families want to reconcile, they want closure, but I don't think that is available if the other side is not willing to come forward.
And Joe, on the issue of the actual mining companies as well, for those who followed your documentary when it came out, I know I certainly followed it very closely, there were a number of gagging orders that came out against you and your film from the mining companies. If memory serves me right, Sibanye-Stillwater took over in 2019. But it seems on the ground, even though there's new ownership, a new mining company, it hasn't really changed. What's your impression of the daily lived reality of a miner now in Marikana?
Look, what I think that a lot of people fail to realize is that that community is subsidizing the mine and relations of production, because the companies or the mining companies and the state are ignoring the property rights of that community. Bondokop is also subsidizing the external social and environmental costs, because one of the things that my film sort of highlighted was the impact that mining has on the environment in and around Marikana. And in particular, its migrant labor force, which we mustn't forget, which is reminiscent of the apartheid era, and the enduring environmental fallout. The community sacrifices so much socially there, and we tend to forget that. The other matter as well is that the governance over the land, villages and the municipal services have been abdicated. Right? There is a dysfunctional Bapo Traditional Authority Council there that lacks legitimacy and does not have the capacity to undertake any of the municipal services. As you would remember, I went in, at the time it was Chief Bob Mohali, and we looked at whether he was a legitimate chief or not. The district is seriously under-resourced, and only, the mining companies historically and currently do not take responsibility for any of the external or non-operational costs, including, the social, the environmental, and the political costs and impacts of the activities and presence in or near the land that hosts these communities.
Khuselwa, let me come in there quickly. Sorry, Joe. I want to just bring Khuselwa in here. I'll tell you what, I'm starting to run out of time on this particular Zoom connection. I want to get these last two comments in from both of you before I say goodbye to you. Khuselwa, I love what Joe is saying, that this is beyond the mining companies, beyond the government influence as well. Joe mentioning the role of chiefs and local leaders in the area. From your perspective, there just seems to be too many players involved in this, which is making it complicated to come to a resolution. Last answer, last minute to you on that comment, please.
On my side, when we're talking about the Marikana community and the issue of land claims, it becomes difficult because the ones that are suffering are the residents of Marikana. And now, if, for instance, those companies, the mine companies that are mining in the area, there is an issue of land claims. I think the people that are mostly affected now, because they don't know who are these funds should go to. At the end, those that are occupying the land are the ones that's suffering the most.
And Joe, let me give you the second last question on this one before I go back to Khuselwa to close things off for us. Tomorrow is exactly 9 years. We're going to see all kinds of officials and authorities coming out tomorrow. Who is the top person you want to see at the Marikana Kopi tomorrow, or at least on this virtual summit, addressing the workers and their families? And what would you want that person to say? Last question to you, Joe.
The person I would love really to see there would be Mr. Cyril Ramaphosa, our president, as the people there have benefited basically virtually nothing. There's been no compensation to speak of or benefits for the development on the land. His company, if you would remember, he was one of the original shareholders within Lonmin through a company called Shanduka Group, which struck the deal in around 2010. They failed to meet even the deadlines to repay their loans for those shares. And it's highly questionable as to how they got access to the land and to the mining rights there. It would be good to hear him maybe apologize for what he has done there. And remember, he was the man that gave them concomitant orders to the then Minister of Police to go ahead with the actions that happened on the 16th. So I would appeal to President Cyril Ramaphosa to perhaps find it within himself to go there and apologize.
Joe, I'm going to say thank you to you for the moment. Don't go anywhere, Joe. Just stay with us. Khuselwa, we've literally got 60 seconds left on the Zoom crossing. It is yours. I imagine you got three options. You got the Socio-Economic Development Minister, you got Economic Development Minister, and you got the President. Who would you like to see? What do they say? You're on the clock. Go. Oh, and we've lost Khuselwa. Khuselwa, I'm going to stay with you for 5 seconds. Let me see if I get you back, Khuselwa. We're going to see if your picture unfreezes. No. Joe, all right, I'm going to give you the last fight on this one then. For the families, you've got 30 seconds. If we don't hear from the President tomorrow, how do we improve the lives of these mine workers? 30 seconds.
Look, I think one of the major issues which we highlighted was that not only the families and the mine workers and the migrant laborers, but the traditional ownership of that land, it needs to be sorted out. Otherwise, the social and economic impacts will still be very negative towards the people there, as well as the environmental impact.
Well, I appreciate your time to both of you. I know Khuselwa we've lost, unfortunately, but to you, Joe Oesi, a wonderful documentary, heart-wrenching documentary you put together years ago. And also we had candidate attorney at the Socio-Economic Rights Institute of South Africa. Such a shame we lost Khuselwa right towards the end. I would like to have heard who Khuselwa Dyantyi would like to have seen at the official commemoration tomorrow, probably being done virtually to a certain degree, but the families who lost their loved ones will no doubt be at that corpus.